Danny Sprinkles built an exciting roster with Washington basketball.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And we've got a real special guest with us. Danny Sprinkle is here. And Danny, you've done a really awesome job over the first couple of months. Kudos to you for building a Washington basketball roster that, you know, for the last couple of years, fans have been a little frustrated because we love Mike Hopkins, but the teams just always seem to be a little bit middle of the road. And you've done a really exciting job getting guys like great Osobor. I'm really excited to talk to you about Tyler Harris. That's a guy I'm super duper high on. And just what was your philosophy as you kind of built out this roster? Did you just kind of want to, you know, look at it in a way of guys that fit your offense more than anything else?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like we kind of went the character and then talent route. And, you know, we had to make sure we were getting the right kids that fit University of Washington academically, socially, but they also had to be talented enough to compete in the Big Ten Conference. And so, you know, by the time we got the job, you know, we had to sign 10 guys in that late period, which is not easy. And, you know, we're not the only school that had to do that. But, you know, I mean, the stress level in that first 60, 75 days, you know, getting the job, you know, with all the things that you have to do, and then to continue to put basically the whole roster together. I mean, it's challenging, but I like, you know, my assistants work their tails off, and I'm proud of the guys that we have.
So, Danny, I remember bumping into you during the spring game on May 3rd, and you said we're going to be good in a couple of years, but that was before most of the roster and most of the guys that are now committed during the program. Do you still feel that same assessment? Because when I talked to Jase Butler, he said, you know, there's kind of a win now mindset, but also you do want to build towards the future. When you built the roster, most of it was veteran guys, juniors and seniors. Was there an emphasis on winning right away, but also still building for the long term, 2-3 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's always for the long term, you know, like, I mean, we want to build sustained success, and, you know, it's hard to hit, you know, lightning in a bottle all the time. And when you're signing 10 guys, not all of them are going to hit, you know, but that's why we wanted to make sure that we were getting the right type of people here, that when adversity hits, that they respond the right way, and they develop that culture for future dogs, you know, coming down the pipe. Like, this is how we respond, this is how we act. And, you know, I don't know how many games we're going to win this year. I don't know, you know, but I know every day we go into practice, like, we're coaching them to win this year, just like everybody is in the country. And so, you know, I mean, we're challenging our guys in the summer, and we're hard on them, and we're trying to, you know, get the chemistry and the toughness together so they represent, you know, the fan base, the former players, you know, and play the right way.
So, Danny, one guy I know I mentioned him a little earlier that I'm really curious to watch because I like watching him down at Portland, and I'm really curious how he fits into your system and what you might have seen from him so far in some of your early workouts is Tyler Harris, because I feel like that's a guy who, if he reaches his full potential, can just be a real game changer in the Big Ten.
He could, you know, he's got all the talent in the world. You know, he has a lot of things that he's got to clean up, but like the talent and the willing to learn and the willing to work is there. You know, he's got to become a lot more vocal. You know, he doesn't say much, if he doesn't really say anything, to be honest with you. And he needs to get out of that mindset and push himself. He's got to be uncomfortable. Like, he's got to do that if he wants to not only be a great player in the Big Ten, but to play at any level professionally. You know, he's got to be a great communicator, and he's got to have that energy that those great players have, because his talent and his shot making ability for being a 6'8" guard is tremendous.
Now, your first commit, I do believe publicly, was Mekhi Mason from Rice University. What was it about Mason that attracted you guys to him early on? And obviously being a guard heavy kind of rotation, just what does he do in terms of setting up the offense, or is he more of a two guard in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, he can play he can play the 1, the 2, the 3. He can play anywhere because he's versatile and skilled. You know, I've known, you know, him and his dad for a long time. And that was kind of one of our ends, you know, that helped us get him. And I think once he felt the this was the great fit, for him socially, academically. He's a tremendous student coming from Rice, but it fit everything that he wanted. And but his talent levels, you go watch some of his games when they played Texas and they played some of those high major teams. Like, that's some of his best games. And, he's another one like Tyler Harris. Like, he has all the potential in the world. He's 6'5", he's long, he can do anything on the basketball court. He's extremely intelligent. And, he's been one of our best defenders so far in the summer. And we're going to need him to do that because not only, he's got to be a tremendous two-way player for us.
So, Danny, one thing that I really enjoyed the video that the UW social team put out of you mic'd up and everything. That I thought that was a lot of fun, and I thought that we really got to know you off the court in that respect. But for any Husky fans who haven't really gotten a chance to watch any of your film for Montana State, for Utah State, how would you describe your coaching style and your team's play style just on the floor?
Yeah, I think intense, physical, like possession by possession. Like we coach them hard every possession. And, and it's my job and my staff's job to demand excellence every possession. And I know we're not going to get it, but it doesn't mean we can't strive to get that. And I think that's one thing that at Montana State and at Utah State, that the kids that really bought into that being our culture, like, we're not going to get out toughed. We're not going to get out tough, out physical. We're not going to get out executed in the last 8 minutes of a game. We're going to try to be extremely disciplined and take care of the basketball. And that's why we're successful, along with, just having, tremendous players at both of those stops. If you don't have good players, I don't care how good of a coach you are, you're not going to be a good coach. It comes down to players and guys really making plays and shots at critical times. And
obviously, the one correlation that you have with both those schools and now Washington is Great Osobor is the correct pronunciation on that. I know you've spoken publicly that you didn't think there was a guarantee that you would get him, but now that when you did get him in the boat, what was that moment like? Was there a sense of relief? And then part two in that, how does he kind of pair with Frank Kapnong and KC Ibekwe, who you do have as two listed centers?
Yeah, I think he fits really well with those two, and even Chris Conway, because, Great is tremendously skilled. He's basically a guard. He's basically a point guard in a 6'8", 250-pound body. He's really good at getting rebounds and pushing the ball up the floor. He can throw lobs. You can set ball screens for him, and he can come make reads. But he's got a tremendous IQ. Like, he knows where the point guard is supposed to be. He knows where the wing is supposed to. He knows where everybody's supposed to be, almost like a quarterback or a point guard. And it just lends to his versatility, and that's why he was a really hard guard in the Mountain West. And he's just continuing to get better. He's shooting the basketball with a lot more confidence this summer, which will translate next year, because he's going to have to knock down a lot more threes in the Big Ten with the size and physicality. But he's going to be able to make the game a lot easier for Casey and Frank, and even some of our young guards, because he's going to be able to take some of the ball handling responsibilities and decision making for those guys.
So, Danny, last one from me here, because I know we got to get you out of here, but I really want to know a little bit more about just your background and growing up a Husky fan. I remember you said in your introductory press conference that you would leave the press box at Montana State and Utah State games. We're not judging you for that. We respect that immensely here on this program. And I just want to know, what were some of your favorite Husky football moments over the years?
Yeah. Now, just to make it clear, I didn't leave all the games. I might be watching the Huskies on my phone a lot of the times too. But, probably, coming out, I remember watching Todd Marinovich, USC, when they came up. And I think the Huskies, we beat them like 31-3. Another game against, Arizona State. I remember the Colorado game when, I don't know if you remember the quarterback Salinese, and Eric Bieniemy was a player for them back then. And so, like, just driving out with my dad and my best friend and his dad at the time, we're in third, fourth grade, it was coming to the bookstore, and we'd be able to get a sweatshirt or a jersey and then go to the game and then drive straight back to Helen at 8 or 9 hours. And so, but that was like our Christmas. And, those are the times that I'll always cherish, just the time with my dad, and just, obviously, even just watching the games on Saturdays or watching the national championship in Logan, Utah with my dad this year. He was down for one of our games, and, we just sat down on my couch and watched those games. And so those Husky football is always special.
That's awesome. Danny, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
And we're going to get back to the show right after a message from our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors does everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to your number ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. That was great. Getting a chance to talk with Danny Sprinkle is super awesome. We really appreciate him taking a couple minutes to take the time for us and just break it down, talk a little bit of basketball, because I'm really excited about his roster. We're bummed we didn't get a little bit more time with him, but I have a feeling this won't be the last time he is on this program. That's why all the everydayers need to make sure they hit that subscribe button, make sure when he comes back on that they already know. And I think this is a top 5 roster in the Big Ten that he's built when, you combine everything it is that, his scheme, all that sort of stuff, with just the guy that we just got to talk to. I'm really excited about this team.
Same. And every question we had, he always threw in one other guy, like, hey, he can do this or this. He can do this and this. It was never, yep. And I think that was what was so exciting when we looked at how this roster was getting put together, was there's every single guy that's probably going to play, which is probably 7 or 8 guys, potentially 9 or 10, depending on how deep Sprinkle wants to go on the bench. But either way, he has the option of so much versatility. That's why I'm so intrigued, because the one thing that, going from the Big Sky to the Mountain West, now from the Mountain West making a significant jump to the Big Ten, that roster construction that he's shown has been good, but it's a different league and a massive jump up to go to the Big Ten. And I'm really intrigued because there were so many things that he said, mentioning KC Ibekwe and even Chris Conway as being potential centers, even though Conway's listed as a forward. It's okay. There's so many different things you can do about this. And again, vindication for my take a couple of months ago on Great Osobor being a good shooter, because I was so glad when Sprinkle said that Danny can. I mean, the fact that Sprinkle also said that he can. I mean, I did not know that Great Osobor was actually that ball dominant in terms and that comfortable being ball dominant.
Yeah, that was one thing that I noticed in some of the workout videos they released, that he is bringing the ball up the floor every now and again. I wouldn't expect that to happen too often, just because of some of the other bodies that they have available to him. When you think about guys like Zoom Diallo, Luis Courtwright, Tyree Ignacio, like when you think about some of those guys, he's not going to have to do it very often, but having that flexibility is so great. And one guy who we unfortunately didn't get a chance to talk about yet, just because of NCAA rules and everything, is Dominic Diamande. I'm sure there are people that, hey, why didn't you ask about him? He's not allowed to talk about him just yet, just in terms of, NCAA rules and recruiting and how some of that stuff works. But Lars, I think that that's the guy who really takes this roster over the top, because the more I look at it, just all up and down the roster, I think that there are a lot of really nice pieces, and I'm glad we got to talk about Tyler Harris with him, because I think Tyler Harris is one of the guys that can truly do that. But having another big wing player who can play a little bit as a guard, but really play on the wing, maybe, especially with somebody like Diamande, who's not necessarily a good 3-point shooter, but is somebody who can just absolutely dominate in the paint. When you're able to add a guy like that to the roster, it does nothing but benefit you in the long run.
Exactly. And the other thing to consider is, even though he is a freshman, or Diamande will be a freshman, he does have pro experience. And so when you look at him and how Tyler Harris at coming up from Portland, or University of Portland, will kind of compare and contrast. That's why you just want to have so many different options. And again, it's a credit to Sprinkle when he will get the chance to talk about it, how he managed to pull this off. And that's, again, kind of the one thing we're not able to talk about right now, but it just speaks to we talked. Danny Sprinkle mentioned this several times. High basketball IQ. I think that Danny Sprinkle can look at the mirror and say high basketball IQ when it comes to how he builds his program. Where he does have some familiarity, as we were talking before the show. He did have a French player at Utah State last season, so he is familiar with the European game, is well aware, and it has brought players over before. And I think that's just kind of a trait that Sprinkle has, where his system is not necessarily player specific, but it's almost like, I kind of want a guy that does this and this. And if the Europeans happen to do that, that works out better for me. And so there's so many different ways that we can sprinkle this about, no pun intended, but it's just,
that's a good one.
but your take, right? But your take about, and again, like we talked about after the interview, we were saying, I think this will finish a top 5 team, and I agree with you because it's certainly a bold take right now, just based on what the rankings are and kind of the preseason expectations. But they're not going to be ranked preseason in the top 5.
No,
but
certainly
just like
not.
just like Daniel Sprinkle did last year at Utah State, where Utah State was not picked to win the conference. They weren't even picked to finish in the top 3 of the conference, if I'm not mistaken. So now adding that kind of fuel to the fire in that regard, I would rather actually have Daniel Sprinkle doubted and say, wow, look at all these guys that Daniel Sprinkle is bringing in and great Osobor and all that. Like, actually, kind of, could you doubt him? Because that tends to help them in the interim.
No, absolutely. And that's something when I look at the construction of this roster, and it goes back to something that I know you've said on this show before, is that he constructed it in the perfect way to be dominant in the Big Ten, where getting guys like Chris Conway and Great Osobor in the fold, which is really nice because they can play the 4, they can play the 5 a little bit, especially since, he mentioned that with us. And then just combining that with the true centers like the KC Ibekwe's and the Frank Kempnongs of the world. That's a really, really dominant front court, because I feel that was the one thing that we really saw as, Utah State got into the tournament last year. It was nice having a guy who could play the 5 that was a little bit undersized in Osobor. And then, you run into a Zach Edey, and I know this is something we've said before as well, but that's a unique case, right? But when you look at it, there are certainly going to be more players like that. And having somebody who, in Frank Kempnong, who I can't say as much as I love the guy, is as dominant as a Zach Edey, but can play that similar role of a true center on both ends of the floor, where he plays with such high intensity on defense, which is just one of my favorite things about him. And then you look at him on the offensive side, and if he's going to draw some double teams, which I'm sure he will, you can dish the ball off to Great Osobor. You've got shooters now, where that was one of the frustrating things about the Mike Hopkins era, was they always claimed there were shooters, but outside of Moses Wood, I can't think of guys that really consistently converted at a super high rate. And one of those guys went and developed really well under Danny Sprinkle in Raekwon Battle. So it's awesome to see something like that come full circle as well. And I'm really excited about this guy. And I think the way he's constructed the roster is great. And just getting a chance to really get to know him is awesome, because I think he's a fantastic coach.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, we did get one sneak question in there, but one question that we didn't get to ask that really, we definitely were going to hit on next time is the hiring of Tony Bland. Because when you look at what again, I think, and Danny Sprinkle would 100% agree, what happened to Tony Bland was relatively unjust when we look back at what the actual grand scheme of things was and the penalty that he ultimately had to pay for what it really shouldn't have been at Steve, really at all. So he still, in that time, went to go coach in California high school basketball, has some significant relationships that I think are going to pay off down the road for Washington, the recruiting trail. And that's one thing Sprinkle talked about with Mekhi Mason, where he had a relationship going back to his dad. Having Tony Bland knew Jase Butler's father. There's a lot of these relationships in the high school recruiting ranks that Tony Bland has that are going to be invaluable for Sprinkle as he continues to build on that. So I think when we get to know more about Sprinkle and Tony Bland, I think people are going to learn to appreciate where Washington's going to be ranked in the Big Ten moving forward.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And that was one of the reasons we were so excited to get him on the show, was because he can really revitalize just what basketball is at UW. Where it's been so long since the Isaiah Thomas days. And that was the last time the Mike Hopkins first couple of years, they were fun, but I don't think they compared to what the Isaiah Thomas years were, the Brandon Roy years were. That's what I think of when I think UW basketball. And one great way that he can do that is on the recruiting trail. And Tony Bland, as you said, is a really nice way to do that. You look at some of the relationships he's developed with, just like players that have highly ranked kids like Trevor Ariza, like Gilbert Arenas. They're in the top 6 for Darren Peterson. Like, that's wild. That's the number 1 guard in the country in the 2025 cycle. And, you've got to credit the entire coaching staff with that. They've done a really good job of doing that. And I think there's a good chance they land him. They certainly aren't the favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but they've done a really good job. They're going to get him on campus in the next couple of months or so. And I'm really excited about what this could look like, because when you talk about a guy who is going to really get after it on the recruiting trail, he's shown that he's going to do that. Look at this transfer portal class. Look at the high schoolers that he's able to go out and keep in Zoom Diallo and get Jase Butler. That's not an easy thing to do. And I think that really, as we get into the swing of things here, I think this is a guy who, you listen to him talk about what Husky football means to him and just what the university means to him as a whole. I think that's a guy who's going to be around for a while and wants to build a monster here. And I think he's going to do a really, really great job of that. And Lars, that being said, let's switch gears here a little bit to the football side of things. Let's talk about the front seven. So, Lars, outside of the offensive line, I would say that the pass rush and the front seven are the biggest question marks that Washington's roster has right now under Jedd Fisch. And I'm really excited about a bunch of guys, but if you had to pick one player right now that you would say this is going to be a breakout guy, whether it makes an all Big Ten team, whatever it might be, sets a new career high and this, that, or the third thing, you can't pick Carson Bruner. Who are you picking?
I'm glad you added that caveat because I'm like, well, the safest pick by far is Carson Bruner, but I think the second safest pick, and this is one thing I was diving in recently on Inside the Huskies on Athlon Sports, was there's so many options, but there's no true one or two guys. Well, actually, there's probably one or two guys you could absolutely say should break out, but beyond that, there's about 5 or 6 guys: Elenius Davis, Russell Davis, Deshaun Lynch, all these guys that they've either brought in or had on the roster that could still emerge, but for all intents and purposes, give me Sebastian Valdez. And I know it's kind of a cheap cop-out in a way because he does come in with the experience, but he does come in with experience from Montana State. And the one thing I think that maybe this is me personally that I've been underrating in this game is his pass rush. Because one thing that I'm intrigued to see with the interior of the defensive line is how much movement are they going to be able to get? Because we know about the edges, Durfee, Holtzclaw, Russell, Davis, the list goes on and on who could be out there. But for me, if you it doesn't take long to go back to 2021 to see what happens when you do not have an interior defensive line. Washington fans, I know we blocked that out for most of the reason, but it's kind of worth mentioning. You go get a guy like Sebastian Valdez, keep him in. And I'm not sure if you saw it, but he posted on Instagram, they took all the photos of wearing the Big Ten logo and for the New Jerseys and everything. Biceps. Full on, like bazookas. Like, my word, that guy's going to hurt some people.
There's a reason that multiple guys are like, yeah, no, that's the strongest dude on this team. I'm really excited to watch him. I'm really glad that was your pick because I kind of looked at this in a little bit of an under the radar. So I kind of removed him. Javon Parker is somebody I'm really excited about, but I kind of removed him from my list because I know we've talked about him a lot. I wanted to go back to one of my personal agendas, and as all the viewers know, we love our agendas here on Locked On Huskies. And I am, I'm opening a new file over here, and I'm just titling it the Deshaun Lynch agenda because I am so excited about that dude. I really, really am. I think this is somebody who I think he's going to start. I really do. I've been doing a little depth chart preview series over on Huskies Wire, and as I'm getting to the defensive line here soon, and I've been looking around for somebody who I think is going to start on the opposite side of Zach Durfee, and I think it's going to be him. I really like the strength he plays with against the run. I love the frame that he uses, and it's just the way that he uses his body. I love every second of that for a guy who's 6'5", 280 playing stand-up edge at Sacramento State. Like, yeah, let's throw one of his hands in the dirt and see what he can do in a Bill Belichick defense, because that's what it is. I know Steve Belichick is the one calling it, but Bill is still the architect, and I'm not going to go down that road today. But I just think that that's somebody who can be a true 3-down defender. And as much as I love the talent on what a prospective front four would be right now for me, which is Durfee, Valdez, Javon Parker, and Deshaun Lynch, we haven't seen any of them be true 3-down defenders in the Big Ten yet. Do I think all 4 of them can be? Yes. And I think that Deshaun Lynch has the potential to be, I don't want to say the best of that group, but I think he can certainly be the most versatile. Where that's a guy who you can kick him inside, and I know we've talked about this before, but that's a guy you can kick him inside as a pass rusher. You can leave him on the outside against and set the edge as a run defender, and all of a sudden that opens up so much more. If you want to kick him inside, even on some running plays and get a Lance Holtzclaw or an Isaiah Ward or a Russell Davis on the field, that's great. You can do that too. If all of a sudden you want to kick him outside and, find a way for Maurice Himes or Jacob Lane to take advantage with their speed and some of their strength against an interior guy, great, go for it. I feel that he opens up so many different things for you to do up front in terms of stunts and whatever else that I'm just really excited about that guy.
See, and this is where it's so intriguing, and it's good to have this discussion because, like I said, there's so many names. We haven't even mentioned Logan Sagapolu. Now, I know he's some people say he might be a reclamation project or a kind of shot in the dark, whatever you want to call it. But I don't think you go get a redshirt, junior, senior from the University of Miami who's played offensive line to just kind of bury him on the depth chart. I do believe he does have 2 years of eligibility left. And it's worth noting for Logan Sagapolu, you do not have anybody else on this roster on the defensive line listed at 368 pounds as a nose guard. So I know the reason why I bring this up is because, again, you're not wrong for saying Javon Parker and Sebastian Valdez are your 2 defensive interior starters. But in the way, Valdez and Parker are kind of the same guy. Both guys could be budding pass rushers. Valdez a little bit bigger, obviously, but not exponentially bigger. But imagine if you put Valdez on one side and Logan Sagapolu on the other. Javon Parker could be that guy rotating in off the bench just to keep healthy bodies, and then you still have 2 natural edge rushers. That, to me, and this is where it gets so important into the position versatility and the options that Steve Belichick is going to have.
I'm so glad you brought this up for a very different reason. And it's because it's something we saw this spring that I haven't seen in a very, very long time from a Husky defensive coordinator. And the last time I saw it, it was Vita Vea when they had him, a defensive tackle, line up as a true edge. And we saw Javon do that a couple of times. And I feel that Logan Sagapolu is the guy who opens that up perfectly. So I'm really glad you brought this up because you can have him play like a true zero, that true nose technique, and have, a defensive tackle on one side or the other in Valdez or Javon Parker or whoever, and have the other guy split out a little bit wider, and then have, these bigger, leaner bodies. Because another name that we didn't mention is the other Miami transfer, and that's Jayden Wayne. Or that's another guy who I'm really excited about. I feel like he has a really, really high ceiling. I'm really curious to see what he's going to look like this year because there are so many just similar body types, and that's not a bad thing. There are just so many similar body types, and so many of them just don't necessarily have all the experience that you might want at the college level, that I feel it's going to be really muddy early on. We're going to see a really, really heavy rotation of, like, you and I are going to be sitting in the press box and, it's Jayden Wayne now. Oh, now it's Maurice Himes. Oh, now it's Voight Tanufi. Oh, now it's Lance Holtzclaw. Where I feel we're going to be doing that a lot over the first month of the season. And then things are going to kind of settle in. But I like this because the nice thing that this allows for is a constant rotation, which we saw last year when you don't have that, or you have to rely on super young guys like Jacob Lane in a lot of spots. And I don't feel that's a knock on him because that's certainly not my intention. But when you have to all of a sudden play a whole bunch of inexperienced guys, or you don't necessarily have the depth in the rotation that you might want, which is where it's nice that you have a piece like a Jacob Bandis in there as well, where, all of a sudden you get into naming all these guys, and a lot of them, they certainly aren't, overly battle tested and overly experienced at the college level. But at a certain point, I don't know if you're going to need that if the rotation is running 4 and 5 guys deep, where everybody is super fresh. And yeah, you're only getting, 10, 15, maybe 20 snaps a game if you're really heavily utilizing the rotation. But that's a really nice way, especially in the Big Ten, to keep your front 7 fresh. And if it ends up working and the scheme works, all of a sudden, hey, you're in an awesome spot there.
Exactly. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. You keep everybody fresh, especially in college. It's almost better. I remember this is a long-term callback to when Tosh Lapoy was at Washington. I remember either me or Bob Condota, I can't remember who asked him the question, but he was asked, how many deep do you want to be on the defensive line? He's like, I want to be 7 deep at every position. Think about that. That's 7 different players. That's not a left end and a right end both counting as one guy. No, it's 1, 2. You're talking 28 guys across the front 4. Washington doesn't have that. I want to be clear, but there is a bevy of options where, even going back to last season, where, okay, if Tua Tele gets down, or who comes in, is MJ good? There's so many options where I'm not necessarily concerned, because let's say Russell Davis doesn't get off the great start, or whoever, pick any player you want. Maybe they don't have. You're no longer worried about, now we got to play a freshman at that position because the guys that we have. And that's why it's important, as you mentioned, bringing in a guy like Deshaun Lynch, some of these veterans, Sebastian Valdez, obviously from Montana State, to make sure you can still bring the younger players along, the redshirt freshmen and sophomores and things like that, but you're still not hamstringing yourself early on. And that's why you go and get a Logan Sagapolu, a 4 or 5 year veteran, and you still have Javon Parker, who I already mentioned. So there's just so many options. But I think the thing that's hard for both of us is since we haven't seen them all play together until they get back on the field in August, we are kind of just somewhat flying blind here, kind of one eye closed. We're like, okay, we know what to expect. You obviously, as a Patriots aficionado, know Bill Belichick's defense and Steve Belichick's expectations for what he should do. I'll defer to you on that. But even at that point, we could project where guys might line up. But who knows? Deshaun Lynch could be an interior guy. He could be a versatile piece either way. We barely mentioned Voight Tanufi as another guy who I know he's undersized, but there's just so many guys on this defensive line. I'm so intrigued to see what ends up coming to fruition, both this year and in long term, because some of the guys, like you mentioned, Jayden Wayne, might not be a factor as much this season, but very much could lead the team in sacks next year or the year after that. So it's good how Jedd Fisch and Steve Belichick have built this defense over this offseason, not just for 24, but going into 25 and 26.
Lars, that's a great place for us to wrap this one up. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Danny Sprinkle again for coming on with us. That was a lot of fun. We're going to have so much more fun stuff like that. And this way to make sure you're updated on all the latest interviews, news, rumors, everything that we've got for you coming on here is to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere, updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you smash that subscribe button, click like on the video, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Also, got any questions, comments, concerns, guests that you want to see on this show, like Danny, drop them right down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.